You can't build a family in a culture that profits from destroying it. And somehow deep down, every man already knows that. He feels it in the silence after a court hearing. He feels it in the empty apartment with the half-built crib. He feels it when he looks at pictures of his child he didn't get to take. There's this haunting awareness now that what used to be sacred has been converted into currency. Marriage, parenthood, family, these aren't sanctuaries anymore. They're markets. And the people who control those markets have no incentive to see you succeed. They make money off of your pain. They profit when you fail. They not only survive, but they thrive off of your collapse. Because a stable man doesn't need much. But a broken man, he'll spend everything he has trying to feel whole again. Let's talk about what this really is. It's not a system. It's an industry. Family court isn't about families. It's about funding. Title 4D of the Social Security Act literally rewards states for collecting child support. For every dollar collected, they get reimbursed by the federal government. For every dollar they get kickbacks from the federal government. The more they collect, the more they get. So if you think about it, the way that it works is the less time a father has with his child, the more money the state makes. That's how it works. The more conflict there is, the more hours lawyers bill. The more supervision, the more evaluators get paid. It's not a mistake, it's a model. It's a business model. They've built a machine that needs broken homes to survive. And the moment that you enter that machine, your pain becomes someone else's paycheck. That's why reform will never fix it. You don't reform a casino by asking it to pay back its winnings. But here's the thing. The destruction didn't start in court. It started in the mind. We were trained generation by generation to see the family as optional. Commitment as outdated, and tradition as oppressive, and love as disposable. Every show, every ad, every song, every movie, it all glorifies freedom through detachment. But that kind of freedom isn't freedom. It's consumerism disguised as liberation. Because when you detach people from each other, you attach them to systems, to subscriptions, to governments, to markets. You can't sell to families who take care of each other. You sell to individuals who feel alone. And when you look around, you realize loneliness isn't an accident. It's the new economy. We've built a culture that glorifies comfort over courage and emotion over endurance, safety and security over sovereignty. And in that trade, men became expendable. We told boys that masculinity was dangerous, so they hid it. We told fathers that authority was abuse, so they surrendered it. We told men that leadership was control, so they abandoned it. Now we have a society of unanchored children trapped in adult bodies, guided by algorithm instead of fatherhood. And when you remove the masculine principle, the protector, the builder, the anchor, you create chaos. Because men, they don't just hold the line, they are the line. A culture without fathers becomes a culture without boundaries. And a culture without boundaries becomes a marketplace of emotion. That's how we got here. Through erosion, through the slow rot of conviction replaced by compliance. And there is a deeper layer to all of this beyond laws and beyond politics. It's existential. When you destroy the family, you destroy meaning. Because the family is the smallest unit of civilization. The first structure where sacrifice, responsibility, and love actually coexist. Without that, you have no initiation into adulthood. You have no hierarchy of values. No reason to suffer nobly. And whenever suffering loses meaning, nihilism fills the void. Look around, you can feel it. People don't believe in anything anymore. Not in love, not in truth, not even in themselves. We replaced wisdom with information, virtue with branding, and purpose with distraction. You can't build families in that soil. It's infertile. It's radioactive. So what's a man supposed to do? He's told to marry, to build, to provide, but every institution that once honored that now punishes it. He's told to risk everything for love, but love is now a legal contract he can't afford to lose. He's told to protect his family, but the state can strip that family from him in a single ruling. He's told to be there for his child, but only on the days someone else allows. And when he breaks, society doesn't care. Society doesn't help. It mocks him. When he cries, it laughs. When he speaks, it censors. We've made the pain of fatherhood invisible because acknowledging it would expose the machinery. So when men suffer quietly, they adapt, they survive, but they don't trust anymore. And that's the tragedy. Not that men have stopped loving, but that they've learned love is the easiest way to lose everything. It's just realism. Now they call this progress. More freedom, more rights, more choice. But freedom without foundation is just chaos wearing a crown. We've traded away vows. We've traded away permanence with pleasure. And our society calls it progress and empowerment while we watch civilization unravel. We We're celebrating disconnection, amplifying things like self-love, which is just self-worship, the worship of autonomy over belonging, of feeling over truth. And that's just what makes it unsustainable for the human race. Because no species can survive if it hates the conditions that make life possible. Family, structure, continuity. The modern West is committing demographic suicide by choice. Not just through war or famine, but through ideology. And it's being sold as freedom. Every time somebody says that we need to bring back the family, I wish it were that simple. I wish it were. But you can't build something on the ruins of trust. You cannot ask men to invest their lives, their money, their sanity into a system that's designed to extract it. You can't tell them to risk everything and then blame them for being cautious. We used to call the man who provided and protected a hero. We don't anymore. Now he's a liability, a walking lawsuit, a future defendant or plaintiff. That's why marriage rates are collapsing. Not because men hate love, but because men have finally realized the deal is rigged. They still want the family, they still want the purpose, but they don't want the noose attached. There's no cowardice in that. That's wisdom born from pain and discernment. The road we're on leads somewhere, and it sure as hell isn't peace. It's sterility. It's isolation. A civilization that forgets how to reproduce, not because it can't, but because it no longer sees the point. We're not facing extinction through violence. We're facing extinction through apathy. When the cost of love becomes higher than the reward, people stop loving. When the risk of family outweighs the reward of connection, people stop building. And when men stop believing it's possible to protect what they build, they stop trying altogether. That's where we are. And that's why it's reckless to tell men to just man up and get married. Because what they're really being told is walk willingly into a system designed to break you and call it noble. You're asking them to march into the slaughterhouse. We don't have manhood, we have martyrdom. And yes, we need families. Civilization depends on it. But before men can rebuild, the culture has to repent. It has to stop profiting from their pain. It has to make fatherhood sacred again. Not transactional, not conditional, not punishable. Until then, until that day, men are right to hesitate. Because the pain of losing your family isn't just heartbreaking, but it's spiritual death. And a culture that demands that sacrifice without accountability doesn't deserve to survive. There are prisons without bars. And the most brutal one is being separated from your child. It doesn't announce itself with handcuffs or chains. It starts quietly with a court order, a signature, a piece of paper that describes when you get to be a father. You walk out of that courtroom not as a free man, but as an inmate of invisible walls. You count days instead of years. You measure time not in seasons, but in supervised hours and missed birthdays. And you realize something no one ever prepared you for. The world keeps spinning, but your soul doesn't. The air feels heavy. The colors fade. Every sound in the house echoes too long because there's no laughter to absorb it. You catch yourself saving things that shouldn't matter. Drawings, voice notes, the smell of their shampoo on a blanket. Because it's all you have left to prove they were real. It's not just heartbreaking, it's exile. It's being sentenced to live in a version of reality where the person you love most exists just out of reach. Alive, yes, but untouchable. And the system doesn't care how it breaks you. It just measures how well you keep paying. You become a ghost that pays child support. A man who visits his own life through glass. And no one tells you that grief doesn't stay loud. It goes quiet. It becomes a hum that never leaves. A gray fog. It's a gray fog that it eats the edges of everything you used to love. You laugh differently. You dream smaller. You stop talking about the future because it feels like tempting God. In the Gulag archipelago, Solzhenitsyn, he wrote that the worst part of prison wasn't the hunger or the cold. It was being forgotten by the world. That's what fatherhood feels like under this system. You're not dead, but you've been erased. You exist on paper, but not in the life of your child. And every day that you survive it, the culture calls it co-parenting. But there's nothing co about it. It's state-enforced isolation dressed up as equality. Men break in different ways here. Some drink, some disappear, some stop believing in anything. But the ones who endure, they become something else. They stop chasing justice in the courtroom and start finding it in their own transformation. Because once you've walked through this kind of hell, you see the whole world differently. You see who profits from your silence. You see who gets paid when you cry. You see how the machine feeds off your fatherhood and calls it progress. That's the real gulag. Not the loss itself, but the conditions to accept it as normal. The expectation that a man should be grateful for partial custody. That he should smile through his own execution and call it hearing. Call it healing. And yet, in that darkness, something divine still burns, a kind of sacred rage, not hatred, but holy defiance. The refusal to let the system define what kind of father you are in your soul. Because even if they take your time, they can't take the truth that you know. Even if they weaponize love, they can't erase the blood bond that connects you to your child. And yes, they can exile you from their world, but not from their memory. If you keep showing up in every way you can. You may never be free in the eyes of the court, but your son will grow up and see who fought for him and who used him. And that moment of recognition will be worth more than every dollar this machine ever stole. There comes a point when a man stops waiting for the system to set him free. He realizes that no one is coming. No lawyer, no judge, no evaluator will ever hand him his soul back. He has to take it. That's the moment fatherhood stops being biological and becomes spiritual. Because when the world strips you of your child, it's not just stealing a relationship, it's stealing your reflection. It's trying to erase the proof that you ever mattered. The only way to survive that kind of erasure is to become undeniable. You stop fighting to be seen by the court and start fighting to be remembered by your child. Not through permission slips and parenting schedules, but through the man you become in the dark. You start building discipline out of despair. You turn heartbreak into muscle. You forge your pain into something the system can't monetize. Integrity. And that's where the resurrection begins, because every man who's been through this knows there's a version of you that dies when you lose your family. And there's another version buried underneath the rubble that only rises after. That version doesn't live for validation anymore. He doesn't beg for fairness. He doesn't need to be believed. He just moves through the world with the quiet power of someone who has seen hell, seen it, and refused to stay. He doesn't chase happiness. He builds meaning. He doesn't look for peace. He creates it. He doesn't ask for closure. He becomes it. And while the rest of the world scrolls through distractions, he's out there doing what men have always done when civilization rots. He rebuilds. One act of strength, one act of love, one act of truth at a time. And it's not for applause and it's not for followers, but because that's what fathers do, even when no one's watching. That's the paradox the system can't calculate. You can strip a man of his rights, but you can't strip him of his nature. Fatherhood isn't a weekend schedule, it's an essence. It's the soul of order itself. And when it reawakens, civilization shifts. So he writes, he records, he speaks, he leaves messages for his son that the algorithm can't erase. He turns his pain into signal, not noise. Because deep down he knows this fight isn't just his, it's generational. This is how the new fathers are born. Not from comfort, but from crisis. Not from permission, but from rebellion. And the more men who walk through this fire and come out unbroken, the more the illusion begins to crack. Because you can't enslave men who no longer fear pain. You can't control fathers who have already been to their own funerals and decided to live anyway. That's the real threat to this machine. It's not anger, it's not violence, but awakened men who have been through the game, the gauntlet. Men who realized the goal was never to win in court, it was to stay human in spite of it. Men who turn their grief into gospel. Men who take their suffering and plant it like a seed in the soil of the next generation. That's what rebuilds the world, not policy, not politics. Fathers who refused to let the darkness have the last word. And maybe that's the quiet revolution that no one's talking about. That while this culture profits from destruction, there's a growing brotherhood of men who are rebuilding something sacred from the ruins. Not with slogans, with scars. Not with theories, with truth. And when their sons grow up and ask, why did you keep going? Why? The answer won't be poetic. It will be simple. Because I had to. Because I had to. Because that's what men do when the world forgets what a man is. There's a kind of silence that follows every storm. Not peace, but absence, just absence. The noise is gone, but the damage remains. And it's in that silence that men finally meet themselves. Not the version they were before the hearings. Not the version the world judged. But the raw, stripped down self that's left when everything else is taken away. That's when you understand something terrifying, that maybe this was never just about family. Maybe this was about the soul, about testing whether the masculine spirit could still survive in a world designed to break it. Because the system can take your child. It can take your money. It can take your name. But it can't take the part of you that refuses to hate. That's the last freedom, and it's the one they can't touch. So you hold the line. You keep showing up, even when no one's watching. You live as if your child is watching every moment anyway. Because one day they will. And what they'll see won't be the man the system described. They'll see the man who endured, who didn't fold, who didn't become what the pain tried to turn him into. That's how you win. Not in court, but in time. You outlast the lie. You outlive the system. And somewhere down the line, when the truth finally surfaces, when your son or daughter asks why you didn't give up, you'll look them in the eye and tell them, because I couldn't. Because I loved you more than my own comfort. Because even if the world made it impossible to be your father, I never stopped being one. That's the quiet victory. The one the culture will never celebrate, but history will never forget. Because every civilization that's ever fallen had men like this, men who refused to surrender what was sacred, men who stayed faithful in the ruins, men who chose truth over acceptance and legacy over comfort. And maybe that's all this was ever about. Not surviving the system, but surviving it without losing your soul. Now we arrive at what's left, what still stands after everything else has been stripped away. You can't build a family in a culture that profits from destroying it, but you can still build yourself. You can still build truth in the wreckage. You can still build meaning where love used to live. Because what they can't take, not through court orders, not through lies, not through exile, is your ability to live honestly. To walk through hell without losing your humanity. To keep your heart open even when it's safer to close it. That's the rebellion now. Not rage, not revenge, but refusal. Refusal to become what broke you. Refusal to pass that poison forward. Refusal to participate in the lie. You don't have to fix the culture to be a father. You just have to live in such a way that your child, one day, when they find the truth, can say, he never stopped showing up for me, even when the world made it impossible. That's legacy. That's love without permission. That's what they can't legislate. Maybe that's all any of us can do now. Be the last honest men standing in a civilization built on deceit. To carry light through a system that worships darkness. To be the living proof that truth still breathes somewhere inside all this noise. Because everything else, every institution, every policy, every illusion of progress, it's all collapsing under its own weight. But truth doesn't collapse. It just waits. It waits for the noise to burn itself out. It waits for the liars to eat their own. It waits for the sons to grow up and start asking questions the system can't answer. And when that day comes, they'll look for the men who stood their ground. The fathers who stayed human in the machinery. Men who were mocked, silenced, and erased and kept going anyway. Those are the men who will rebuild what was lost. Not because they were chosen, because they refused to disappear. So live like that. Speak like that. Raise your son like that. Even if the world calls it rebellion, let it. Because rebellion, when truth is outlawed, is just another word for love.